We are
Okay,
live.
awesome.
Gonna
Hi
open
guys,
this up.
thanks for joining. We're just setting up our webinar as well, so just give us a little bit of time here.
So we just opened up the room to all the attendees. So maybe let's give them a couple minutes here. But we're live on IG and at Aura LLP, and we're live with Zhou Realtor on IG also.
Yes, that's right.
That's correct.
Happy to have you guys.
Yeah, it's great to be on here. We've been meaning to do something together for some time, Lou, I think, and now finally we're getting a chance to do it. And I don't know how you want to do this, Andreas. You want to introduce everyone, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, let's give it a few minutes. We got 9 people in the room. Let me just see here who's here. Okay, so we've got 6. We've got Christine, Lorenzo, Nicole, Reed, Shai, Victor. Okay. An anonymous person here. It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Okay, awesome.
Cool.
Okay, so let's
get it started here.
Yeah, let's get it started. So my name is Andreas Kalogiannides. I'm a co-founding partner of Aura LLP. So we're going to introduce everybody very shortly. What we're going to do first is explain a little bit of the housekeeping here and how this is going to work. So we are live streaming on Instagram Live on Lou's Instagram account. What's that Instagram account, Lou?
Zhou Realtor. What's up, Mike? How are you guys?
We're also Instagramming live on Aura LLP's account. We couldn't get the Facebook Live and YouTube Live to work. There's some audio issues there, so we're going to be reposting and recording this conversation later and put it up on there. So there is going to be a recording of anything that we talk about today. All the attendees, this is a roundtable format. So it's meant as an informal conversation amongst the 3 of us, giving our thoughts on COVID-19, how that impacts the real estate market in the GTA, Canada, the GTHA. We're going to dive into macroeconomic issues. We'll get to some legal issues as well. We'd encourage you to ask questions on IG and also on the webinar. And how we're going to take questions is about every 10 or 15 minutes or so as questions come in, we'll take a look at the questions that are left in the chat. And you can see the chat on the bottom of your screen there. You can just chat and everybody can see what you're saying. And we'll pick a question and we'll try to answer that question as well. And you can also, for those of you on Instagram as well, please send questions through IG. We'll kind of cycle through taking those questions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to keep it pretty free-flowing and pretty casual for this chat. It's meant as a roundtable, so we want to get everyone's thoughts together as well. And if anybody, let's just dive right into it.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously COVID-19 has impacted all of us huge. I don't think any one of us really expected it to get this far. Everyone has really, really been impacted. But I mean, on your guys' end, so you guys are, are full-time lawyers, you guys have your own firm. How are you finding the situation right now?
Well, I think that right now things are super challenging for just adjusting to the idea of not having an office and inviting clients in. Initially was very challenging, I think. But I think Andreas and I, the firm that we built, was always, intended to evolve, to change, to adapt to what was happening in the market. And I think it's quite obvious that at this point in time, the easiest thing to do would be to say, look, you can do whatever you need to do. We can give you advice from anywhere. And people seem to be quite receptive to that. We can give you legal advice if you're sitting in your bathtub. Hopefully you're not sitting in your bathtub, but we can give it to you from anywhere. And, there was nothing stopping us from doing that before. The issue about signing documents has always been sort of an obstacle for real estate in particular. But, there's been some laxed rules and some changes there from the Law Society. But we've also sort of jumped on it and said, look, we can close your deal from anywhere, So at this point in time, I mean, we've seen an impact. We've seen sort of we've seen a slowdown. I'd say we saw a slowdown for about a month, and then I don't know if it just meant that things were already down the pipe, and so as a result, they were just on their way to us. But, the market, I haven't seen it completely fall off. I know Lou and you and I, we talked about this before, and I said like, oh God, I think that we're going to see nothing. and I don't know that we're hitting that point right now. I'm seeing that we're seeing a drop, but I don't see that it's nothing. And so, I wonder from your end, Lou, as a realtor, just sort of what your thoughts are on that. Are you thinking that in fact the market will just bottom out, or will it what kind of a decrease are we looking at in the next, few months? What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, just to quickly touch base on IGTV, we actually couldn't get another person on here. His name is Ryan, and he's the one that you just heard speak. So I literally have to unplug every single time he speaks, so you guys can hear.
Sorry, guys. Thanks for accommodating all of our technical difficulties that we're just working through.
You know what we should do? We should do some introductions. I forgot to do that.
Oh yeah.
How about we get back into introductions?
Sorry, we just jumped on that, eh?
We just jumped in. So, just welcome everybody. My name's Andreas Kalogiannides. I practice law in Toronto through Aura LLP. Ryan is my partner in the firm. I focus mostly in business, entertainment, and a bit of real estate. I've got a personal and professional interest in real estate, both within the law but also outside of the law. I keep abreast of all the trends that are taking place in regards to development, how the asset class of real estate is evolving, and how that's being impacted economically and socially. And I've got a keen interest in development. So that's a little bit of background on me. Lou, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, so my headphones, for some reason, they're not working now. So if you guys hear an echo, just let us know. They're on IG Live. But I am a real estate agent with Century 21 Heritage Group. I pretty much work the entire GTHA, and I specialize more, I would say, in residential as well as pre-construction properties. I've worked with many developers on their end, as well as, of course, being on the buyer end. So we really just wanted to get back to everyone's questions here, because I know there's a lot of, there's a lot of thoughts around what's happening. There's a lot of, you guys want to know what's going to happen, and you want to better predict. So that's what we want to try and do here for you guys today.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Lou. I mean, Ryan,
you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So sorry. My name's Ryan Martin. I am the co-founding partner with Andreas Kalogiannides of Aura LLP. I deal almost strictly in real estate, commercial, residential real estate, some other transactional work, sort of peripheral to that is our focus at the firm. Of course, and as well, I have a very keen interest in just sort of the real estate market in general, also design, architecture, how this COVID situation is going to impact things like architecture, urban planning, just, that's sort of an interest of mine. So that's why we've decided to put this podcast. We put this Zoom presentation together, and that's sort of who I am and how we're involved and how I'm involved in the equation here.
Okay. So I think now that we got introductions over, we can get back to it. I like to offer a perspective on where I see, real estate right now, where I see this, the impact that COVID's having. I think it's important to realize that it's really, really too early to be making any kind of concrete or bold predictions. I think there's not enough information and data in the system. And these shocks that we're experiencing socially and economically will take time to work through the system. And so I think you should be wary of people who say they have any kind of clear answers, because really nobody knows what's happening, and everyone's dealing and digesting at the same time. And so I think it is very important to have patience right now and wait for information to come out. Similarly, I think real estate is a very big topic. And I think that when we talk about real estate, we have to be careful to be really intentional about the kinds of descriptions and words we're actually talking about. For example, renter market is very different than the home ownership market. The condo market is very different than the single family home market. The different geographic markets are different. Brampton is not Toronto. It's not Georgina. They're very different. So when we talk about real estate, I think we need to be very specific about the impacts of economic slowdown or of COVID or what have you, and be specific about what really we're talking about when we talk about real estate. So I think those are some guiding points that I want to offer up.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, especially, to your point, Andreas, about markets, from market to market, we have very, very different landscapes. What happens in the Brampton market versus Toronto, people seem to think is the same, but in fact, it's fundamentally different, not only from a real estate sales and buy and sell perspective, but also from a legal perspective. What the landscape looks like from a legal perspective in Toronto versus what it looks like in Brampton, fundamentally different, right? You have large tracts of land, or at least you had large tracts of land over the course of the last 15 years that were being developed out in Brampton. In Toronto, not really the case. You had smaller plots of land that maybe were turning into bigger developments, taller developments, so tower developments, or you have sort of the triplex market as a very busy market. And you have, legally speaking, you have very different challenges in those markets, from market to market. Toronto, you're dealing with things like zoning. You're dealing with bylaw enforcement, which is very fundamentally different in Brampton than it is in Toronto. You've got a very different landscape there. So you're right to define it just on that one point. And I think that for the purposes of what we're talking about, I mean, I'd like to make sure that Lou gets a real good say here about the buy and sell market, number one, but in particular, the pre-construction market and what she's seeing happening there when we're talking about real estate in the umbrella under the specific description of pre-construction, what she thinks is going on or what she's seeing as happening right now. So I just sort of put that to Lou. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you guys are absolutely right in terms of every market is going to be different, right? Whether we were going through this or not, like whether we're being impacted by COVID-19 or not, if we're thriving, each market is different. Brampton is not going to be the same as Toronto, as Hamilton, et cetera, et cetera. To touch on your point about pre-construction, we have seen a slowdown in terms of registrations, builder emails, promotions, builders spending dollars on marketing. Everyone's kind of pulled back. Buyers as well, developers, of course. But people are just kind of on the sidelines, curious about what's going to happen, right? So developers are still thinking, okay, what can we do? Are we going to launch now? Are we going to do our second phase now? Is this should we still kind of move forward with it? On the consumer side, people are still registering. We still have, an influx amount of people coming in every day, actually. But whether, they're really ready to pull the trigger, we don't know, right? A lot of people are just kind of on the sidelines speculating on what's going to happen. Do I foresee maybe a few projects holding off for maybe a year or two if they haven't launched? I can definitely see that happening. Projects that are on the go, I think there's going to be some delays for sure. And, that could affect people. That could be a plus for people as well. Yeah. Right? Sometimes they, of course, they want it delayed. But as you and I also spoke about, sometimes the delay can affect them huge. It can actually be more costly, right? So if they already sold their home, etc. So that's where it is right now. But we have a huge surge of development, especially in the Toronto area. I don't foresee them, kind of taking a pause to everything because there's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to add some color to that. I think that construction is continuing. So the one of the main things that I see is that the efficiency rate of construction is going to drop off by about half because of social distancing rules on the work site, because of the lack of availability of, to some extent, capital, but to a bigger extent, trades and work people on the site because of social distancing, because less people are going to work. The efficiency rate is going to be slower. So projects are moving ahead from what I'm hearing and reading from developers that have shovels in the ground and are able to continue working during COVID. But the efficiency is maybe going to be around 40 to 50% instead of 80 to 90%. And that's going to be temporary. But at the same time, it's going to last as long as the economic fallout continues and gets worse. And also as far as the social distancing takes place. And different projects are going to be impacted in different ways. Different developers will react differently in different markets. So again, this goes back to the idea that when we're talking about real estate, we're talking about general kind of assumptions and discussions, but it also is very specific to the project at hand. And, well, the other thing I was going to add is that I know that developers now are working very closely with the municipalities, kind of hand in glove in a way that I don't think they've as close as they've worked in the past. And that's because they know that the permitting process really has to be expedited to allow efficiency to continue to roll on. Because the reality is, like you mentioned, Lou, people still need to have shelter. People are in between homes if they're waiting for something to be built. And that's the other thing that really distinguishes real estate from a lot of other asset classes in terms of volatility is it's shelter, and it is an essential service at the end of the day. And so I think that is important to keep in mind when we talk about whether things are going to slow down or prices are going to drop or projects are going to stall.
Yeah. I mean, post COVID-19, this would have been a super, super hot market. Right? Everyone was just kind of standing by beginning of 2019, and then boom, November 2019, we completely took off and we didn't stop until, these rules and regulations were put into place, right? So had we not had any of this, it would have been a pretty close market to, the beginning part of 2017.
Mm-hmm. So what are you seeing with your clients now? I mean, like March was very busy in terms of activity. There was the market was, in terms of sales volume, was up 40% from last year. Prices were up 20%. But now, and April was kind of a tipping point. And now a lot of things seem to be drying up, at least in terms of the deals also that we see. So what is your perspective on how your clients are reading all of this?
I mean, a lot of them are on the sidelines. What I say to them is, if you don't need to, don't do it, right? That being said, there are still a lot of people that have to. For example, those that purchase pre-construction that are closing, they need to sell because they need to move in somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Those people that sold before this whole thing happened, they need to buy, they need somewhere to go. So how long that time period is and how long it lasts, that's really going to determine how the market will be afterwards, right? Because right now there's still a huge essential, right?
Right.
Jonathan is...
I see him there, yeah.
Jonathan's a good friend of ours. Hey, what's up?
Okay. What's up, Jonathan?
Turn on your
And
video.
also, guys, feel free to ask questions. I see a few questions popping up on Instagram here, so I'm just going to take a quick chat.
Sure.
Quick look.
So while we're looking for a question, I would say, Lou, are you looking at specific markets? Are you seeing pockets of different situations happening from market to market? So in other words, are you looking at Toronto and then seeing it to be a place where construction projects are sticking versus, I don't know, Hamilton, or I'm not sure where else your focus is, but maybe Markham, north of Markham? Are you seeing things stall in those areas, or is it just sort of still busy as far as you can tell?
It's funny. It's almost like up and down in all areas. I was showing homes in North York as well as Aurora and Richmond Hill, and it would be similar type of property. One of them would have multiple offers, one would sit on the market. Mm-hmm. And just speaking with different agents too, some of their listings had, showings, some of them didn't. But overall, in general, the showings did decrease by about 50%. Right. So that does give you kind of an idea of where the mindset is, right? Yeah. So the market too of being kind of up and down is a reflection of people's mindset. as well.
Yeah, everyone's in a wait and see pattern. I mean, real estate essentially is frozen, and which I think is very normal reaction, like you said. But it's also it's a good thing, and it reflects the type of asset class that real estate is. It's a very illiquid thing. There's a high transaction cost to buying and selling. It's a big decision separately than that, and so you're not seeing the same volatility as you see in stocks and bonds, right? Where the stock market has been plunging and it's going to plunge further. It's very liquid. It's a totally different market. Right. And I say that to draw a distinction, but also to say that it's the level of, we're not at all by any means at a panic stage. Real estate is always a long-term game. It is always a game of patience, whether you're building, buying, selling, or holding. And so I think that's important to keep in mind too.
Yeah, just to touch base, so sorry, we have someone here, Rakuten Inspire. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
What's the question, Lou, for everybody?
It wasn't a question. So he said March data is a viable indicator of where the market currently stands, but April will give us a good sense of the market position going through a full COVID lockdown social distancing period. I agree 100%. Half of March, we were still kind of moving along. It was actually March 14th, they started closing down museums. And so that's, mid-March. And then April, I completely agree, is going to be, a really good indication of kind of, where we stand after these full regulations.
So part of, where we stand, what do you think is going to happen to pricing? So we know sales volume is going to be down for sure. What about pricing? What are your thoughts there?
I think pricing is going to definitely take a hit. By how much, again, we don't know. Unemployment rate is going to play a huge role in this.
Oh, yeah.
The longer we're in this, the more detrimental it will be. If we're in this a little bit shorter, the less impact. But I do see prices taking a hit. I don't know if pre-construction, condos or homes are going to cut their prices. It boils down to so many other things behind the scenes, like what they got their land for, how their financing is, what their investors are thinking. So it's really difficult to judge from a pre-construction standpoint, but from a resale standpoint, I definitely see there being a lot more negotiation room. The only other thing that we kind of have to battle now is sellers coming down in expectation. So kind of like 2017, the prices had dropped, but there were so many homes starting to come up and stay on the market because sellers' expectations were up here when really they needed to be like down here, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's something we're going to start seeing too.
Yeah, I wonder whether we'll have enough time for the market to really adjust to that. Because if we're talking about, I mean, again, it really depends. Like you're saying, if we're talking about 4 or 5 months out, if we're talking about 4 or 5, 6 months of this, that's one thing. If we're talking about a year, if we're talking about, 24 months where circumstances are uncertain about whether somebody can go in to do a showing, that is going to have massive implications for price. I think you'll start to see people being like, you know what, like I'm going to offer, especially, right. It's those multiple offer circumstances, at least in my view, that you start to see prices, climb to places that don't make sense. And there's a question as to whether that can happen in a market where you can't do a live showing. Now, you could do live showings. I'm sure maybe, Lou, you're still doing them, but it's different. I would imagine. Like, I think it's in the mindset of the public, even it's different. They're not going in. They don't need to go in because, let's face it, normally you go in because you want to touch things and you want to like feel what it's like to be in the space. I mean, I think people are less interested in that at the moment. They're sort of like, if I could see it and I had a VR view of it, or I had, you know what I mean? Or, if I had some good pictures or something, I think we're going to get to a point where people can get comfortable. But that blip, if it's 5-6 months, that's one thing. The market may not, we may not see much of a drop in comparison to what we're seeing already versus again, like a year out where things like are stalled, or, a mindset hasn't shifted and we're waiting for that to happen over the course of a year. It really depends on timing. I really think it's interesting. Like, are people doing showings actually, Louis? Is that something that you're doing? Are other realtors doing it? Do you know, or maybe there are other realtors that can contribute to this conversation as well if they want to tell us?
Yeah, so I mean, real estate was labeled, of course, as an essential, but TREB, so the Toronto Real Estate Board has reached out, OREA has reached out and said, just because you're an essential does not mean business goes back to normal, right? The amount of work now it takes to book a showing is like putting together an offer. You have to sign a contract saying, you know, you haven't traveled. If you did, you know, you've self-isolated for 14 days. You don't have any symptoms. You got to put your buyer's name. There's restrictions, like 2 people max, 1 person. You got to come in with gloves, masks, booties. When you go in, you don't touch anything. You can't touch anything. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of these tenanted properties as well, they don't allow showings. Right. Literally, it says on the listing, submit an offer and you'll get to see the place.
Yeah.
And listen, like, I totally get it. You know, if I was selling my place, I would want the most, you know, precautions taken for people coming to see my home, right? So the showings, the new rules in regards to showings is definitely going to have an impact too on prices.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think pricing is really going to depend on, like we talked about, the length of what the economic repercussions are really, which we don't know yet. But I think it's really very market dependent, because I think that I think the Toronto market is going to be largely fine. And I say that for a couple of reasons. I say that because for existing housing supply, the demand supply disequilibrium, it's a weird word to say, still exists, meaning that the fundamentals of the market before COVID have not changed whatsoever, meaning that there's not an equilibrium between the supply and demand fundamentally. So the market in the GTA is still very strong. We're even as you know, we bring on new housing supply, it's still not enough to satisfy demand by about 60,000 units a year. And that trend it pre-existed COVID, and I think that will continue. I mean, the other reason is, I think that in terms of pricing, especially for existing projects that are shovels in the ground, and Toronto actually right now has 27% of all of the cranes in North America in Toronto, which is double New York. It's more than double New York, which is really insane. So we have 124 cranes, and 70 odd of those are exclusively residential cranes. So that just gives you the kind of magnitude of all the projects that we have. But these projects, like 95% of them are construction loan backed, and they've got certain pro forma profit margins that they've got to meet within the lending requirements of the projects on the building envelope. And so there is a certain extent to which the lenders and everyone involved cannot have the pricing fall per square foot too much, because the project will become unviable, and the demand is still there. The demand will be there in a year. And so I don't see that there's any kind of a collapse that's happening. I think on the resale market, you'll see a little bit of a dip for sure. You're seeing that already, but that's due to the uncertainty. And I think because of how expensive and the construction costs are now, because of how pro formas have been developed, and because of the fact that there's still a huge demand for GTA real estate, I think that the pricing will dip a little bit, but I think it'll remain fairly stable.
Yeah, I think I hear your point there. I would say that, you know, I wonder whether what the long-term impacts of COVID are in terms of the mindset of a person. Like if I know like you wanted to get out there and go broad here, but this is sort of a philosophical question, which is, I think that you'll start to see, you know, people being a little bit more content with the possibility that, you know what, if I had more land, I could do my work that's highly commercial, that's plugged into Toronto, out in a farm in Keswick, and not a big problem for me to do that, you know? And I mean, I think you're right. Probably Toronto is not going anywhere in terms of demand, because there will always be people that want to be in the center of culture. But when you start to think about the demand and how people were trying to chase being close to the core, you may say, look, as somebody who can operate virtually, which seems to be something that we're all more comfortable with, I would say, if you go straight down that path, I can see it where, there'll be an increase in demand for things that are way out there. I can see that happening. I wonder whether that will, what kind of an impact that will have on the economy as a whole, real estate in general, but kind of the economy as a whole. And, because I think projects that really happen in those areas first. And maybe you'll start to see an influx of people who are not interested in developing anything out in areas like that, right? I mean, you've always seen it, but I can see that there may be an opportunity for an increased demand there.
Yeah, I think some people will make an individual decision to move out of XYZ core or kind of downtown central area, urban area. I do think though that you look at what municipalities are encouraging in terms of development and housing stock, and what the urban plans look like, and they're all density driven. And I don't think that's going to change. I think because there are a lot of advantages that do come with density, and from an urban planning perspective, the GTHA has been getting away from the urban sprawl for many years. And so the official plans and secondary plans of Toronto, London, Barrie, et cetera, they're very core driven. And not only is there a bigger demand for that kind of lifestyle, but also it's more environmentally friendly. There are access to cultural benefits. There's a lot of, and that you can offer a great quality of life if you get density right. And I think that's the key thing here. And, Jennifer Keesmaat talks a lot about that. And I agree with her on that point is that density for density's sake is a terrible idea. But if you get density right in terms of the mix of community and design and amenities, density actually offers so many social, psychological, and economic benefits that people really want.
We got a question here, I think, in...
Do we have an IG question? Or is that's John there?
Comments?
No option to. I'm trying. I don't know, John. I don't know how to help you, buddy.
What's also happening is key developers that recently launched pre-COVID have mentioned that they might reduce price on second phase launches and retroactively give purchasers in earlier phases a cashback at closing. I haven't seen any developers do that on my end, but that's definitely an option, especially if... So it depends. Some developers are willing and ready to hold. Some, do really need to get rid of their inventory because the banks are getting at them too, right? So, but that's a good point.
What was sorry, I missed that question. I'm sorry. Did we?
It was. So he said, what's also happening is key developers that recently launched pre-COVID have mentioned that they might reduce price of the second phase launches and give purchasers in the earlier phase a cashback at closing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you might see that as an incentive because the reality is that while developers can't go below a certain kind of pro forma profit and loss envelope, the reality is that there are people who are lined up and making deposits and in that deposit cycle that are in the midst of losing their job. Or again, and even if they're not losing their job, their savings, household saving rates are saving stock is getting eaten into right now. Yeah. So they recognize that to move the asset, that there's a certain level of incentive they can give. What I don't think though is that it's going to be anything drastic, right? For example, even in some assignments that I've seen on the market in right front in Parliament area or King West, they were going for about 10% less per square foot than they were a month ago. So it's exactly the same unit. Nothing has changed, but instead of say $1,150 per square foot, it's being sold and actually sold for $1,025.
Yeah, I do foresee developers coming up with, creative ways to kind of help the situation. I think deposit structures are going to be huge. Because in order, Toronto, pre-construction for sure, you got to put down at least like around 25%, minus the bigger companies like Daniels. They always do the special 5% or so. But we are going to see, some creative things coming on, I think, within this month and the next, depending on how long this goes for. But I do foresee that. Guys, if you have any questions, like feel free to, send them our way. We're totally
happy to answer. I mean, I just wanted to go back to what we were talking about, their landlord and tenant situations. Right now, if you're a tenant, I think the problem is, there's absolutely no reason why you may want to leave, even if you can't pay rent, given that the circumstances are sort of out of your control. I think that's understandable, but I really think what we're seeing now is sort of like there's a backup, like a backlog. We've got some clients that are coming through that, are just sort of at a roadblock, right? Because, they have a duty to accommodate these tenants, and, simultaneously, if they're looking to sell their place, it's, they have a right to be able to do that, but they're sort of inhibited by their obligations to provide some accommodation to these tenants. I think, and people have asked me whether there's a solution to the problem. I don't see that there is at this moment in time. I mean, I think that we're in an unprecedented circumstance, and people who own houses right now are going to, and they have tenants, and if they want those tenants to leave, whether it's because they want them, they want to sell, or because tenant hasn't been paying rent, you're kind of you're in a standstill in that regard. So you've got to keep a tenant in your home if they haven't paid your rent, which could have long-lasting impacts. And I actually see that as a potential long-term problem for the economy, because I think a lot of people rely on that rental income to cover that mortgage. So, banks aren't going to defer, well, maybe they will, but banks aren't going to defer mortgages forever. But you can see that the dependence on that is going to be, it's going to be sort of gone for the next few months, I would anticipate, and for a lot of people. And I can see that having a potential long-term impact. I wonder, Andreas, if you have a comment on that, but I think that's, I can see that happening pretty easily.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I want to say about the rental market. I think that you're right. I mean, the rental market typically has a different rate of income and savings than homeowners. And they also don't have the same type of government programs currently that are available for homeowners, for just specifically for renters. At the same time, though, what happened in April, where a lot of the major landlords foresaw that there's going to be a dip in rental payments, it was about 75% of all renters made their April 1 payments, no problem. And then the remainder of that had open discussions with landlords to work things out. And so everybody, the industry was expecting a large dip in rental income, and that never happened. And so, yeah, I think that is definitely going to continue. And I think the other thing that's interesting about the rental market is that now that you've got, say, short-term Airbnbs are gone, you're having a lot of that stock come back online, back onto the long-term rental market. And then again, because people are maybe delaying buying decisions, people have less money. There's going to be an absorption, I think, of the vacancy rate. So the vacancy rate is going to go down, where going to go up, where there's more rental stock available for people. So I think you're going to see if anything, a decrease in rental pricing, maybe by 2, 3, 4%
right,
over that time, because there's going to be an increase in supply, and which is good, because Toronto needed that in the rental market. It was really, really, really overheated.
I just want to add something, because I know a few people actually reached out to me regarding, what to do if you're a landlord and your tenant's not paying rent. So, I mean, there are a few things you can do, whether they end up paying or not, it's really going to be kind of a case-by-case scenario, depending on where they are and why they can't pay rent. But so there are actually rent banks that they can go and apply to. It's per region. So Toronto, Peel, York, they all have their own, and there may be a relief system for them there. I would say, try to work out some sort of payment plan with them, if they can do anything. I think, even if I think now they can pay by credit cards too. So
Yeah.
try to talk to them and see, because I mean, it's hard. I understand it's hard to kind of have a good relationship when you're trying to get your money, and they just can't, because it's a hard situation for you too. But try to work something out with them, a payment plan, anything, right? So
I think landlords are, from what I'm hearing anyway, they're pretty receptive to that, because everybody is in a cash crunch. Landlords as well. Whether you're a corporation or you're a smaller shop or you're an individual. So yeah, I think that's great advice. Like opening up that conversation, and having that good faith dialogue is really what's going to keep this alive. And I think what's going to just serve the fact that we really are in this all together at some level.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, when you think about it, you're better off negotiating with your tenants given the circumstances. When you look at your options, right? So you've got a situation where, okay, either I can negotiate with this individual that maybe they can give me some money rather than none, or I can evict them. Let's say we take them down the road of the eviction process, which you can, by the way, still do. So you still have that as an option. I mean, you can file paperwork, you can serve them notice for whatever, non-payment of rent, for whatever it happens to be. Those notices can go out. The problem is on the enforcement side. So you're not going to be able to actually get a sheriff there to pull someone out of their house. But notwithstanding, if you want, I think that you're in a better situation if you can keep that tenant, assuming they're a decent tenant, they're paying rent, by working something out with them, because if the alternative is you're going to lose that tenant and be forced to find a new tenant in this climate, I think you're going to be in a real hard place. I can't see that being more favorable than negotiating down your rent, for the month.
I don't know what my dad's doing.
The joys of working. The joys of working at home. I love it.
I know.
Oh my god, that was so cute.
So,
no, I agree 100%. Sorry, you were gonna say, Andreas?
Yeah, I think. Where do we think on what's happening with immigration? I want to bring that up because there's a really intimate relationship between immigration and real estate, especially in Toronto, where in the GTHA we're welcoming in traditionally about 150,000 net immigrants to this area every single year. And with the COVID situation, that may or may not continue. And that's been a big driver of the real estate pricing, and then the lending market, private markets, all of that. So, I'd be interested to see what you guys think. My personal thought is, again, I think the fundamentals of the Toronto GTHA market have not changed. And I think once this all settles down, I think you will see an uptick in immigration again, but I do think you will see a dip. And I think it'll be similar to what you saw in 2008, 2009, where you had a dip, but then in 2010, 11, 12, the immigration came back and kind of boosted the market. So what do you guys think about that?
I guess I could start, Lou. I'll say.
It looked like you were ready to go, so I was like, okay.
What I'll say. I mean, look, I think that unquestionably, there's going to be a dip right now. What I will say is that I think now the interesting thing is that it's, the opportunity versus the potential downfall. I could see a potential shift happening whereby you get foreign buyers buying into the market nevertheless, because in fact, I think now it's probably easier than ever for you to buy into the market if you're a foreign buyer, right? I mean, what do you need to do? I mean, you don't need to be in Canada, that's for sure. I mean, the Law Society's relaxed its rules. It's pretty easy to close a deal overseas right now. All you need is probably a Canadian realtor. You need a Canadian lawyer, and I think you're probably good to go. I mean, you can do everything by video now. And so it's a question of how quickly people will catch up, right? Are they going to catch up to this in time? for there to capitalize on the obvious inevitable dip that's going to happen, because I really think, even for foreign buyers, that's only going to help, right? There's of course foreign buyer tax that's expensive, etc., but it may not be expensive. It is proven not to be too much of a deterrent for a lot of Chinese investors, as an example. So I don't. I can see that there will emerge from this sort of another kind of market where people are like, look, it's pretty easy to virtually close my deals in Canada. I may just buy, I may buy property more. I might sort of increase my investments over there. So I don't know. I mean, that's my theory. I don't know how effective that theory is, or we'll sort of see whether that pans out over the course of the next few months. But it's just a thought I had. What about you, Lou?
No, so I think especially over the past couple of years, a lot of people know that Canada is such an amazing place to live, right? Toronto being, of course, one of the hot spots. Foreign buyers are actually pretty heavy in this market right now. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Okay. Especially in the pre-construction market, what a lot of them are doing is that they're purchasing pre-construction and they're applying for their PR card so that when they close, they don't have to pay the foreign buyer tax. I can't speak for all, ethnic groups, but I know people from Hong Kong, people from China, like that's what they're doing, right? Hong Kong, you're not really restricted with your deposit, but in China, you are restricted with your deposit. So I'm seeing less of people coming from China, but a lot more people from Hong Kong because there's not that restriction. But that's what they're doing so for example, I had one that didn't actually work out because the closing was too soon. Right, they want something actually a lot longer so that they know that they'll have the PR card by that time.
Right. Interesting. So that's probably, that probably isn't. I mean, I don't know. Will that have an impact as a result of COVID? You think, like, will there be a dip there for the foreign buyers coming in, or is that you think will just continue? I don't know.
I think we're gonna see a dip in all areas for a bit. I think it's really just the mindset of how quickly people can get past it, right? It's like once everything opens up and the restaurants are open, and you can fly again. Are you going to do that immediately, or are you still gonna kind of wait and see what happens, right? And I think that's where everyone is because this is such a new thing that's happening, something super unexpected that people don't know how to deal with it yet, and they're literally taking it step by step until they make that move, right? But I think the confidence will definitely come back.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm reading right now in terms of confidence is that, and just numbers, I mean, we've got 1.6 million Canadians unemployed in the last 2 weeks alone. We've got 10 million Americans, or I think it's 16 million Americans who are unemployed. Those numbers are going to grow. I mean, I read in the IMF is saying that Canada's economy in 2020 might contract 6-7%, which is really, really insane when you think about it. And then they're projecting very conservative, moderate, slow growth for 2021 at 1.2%. So I think where we're at is economically, we're definitely in a wait and see. It's going to be they're going to be a very, very tough period followed by hopefully what is a slow recovery. And I think that, again, for certain, the GTA and the GTHA market is that, I'm going to go back to that demand-supply disequilibrium, which still exists. I don't think this changes the fundamentals of that market. So whether things, in terms of pricing and availability of supply, comes back in 6 months or it comes back in 18 months, it will be back. And I think personally, when it is back, there's going to be a frenzy of activity in terms of sales and bidding wars and pricing. Because again, the for me, and just reading the tea leaves, the demand is there, in a very, very strong way.
Right. So, go ahead, Lou.
I let you go now. So no, I agree. The demand is pent up right now. Like, that's for sure. The amount of people that are kind of waiting on the sidelines right now is huge. Out of that number that's kind of sitting there, whether they become unemployed or whatever, and for how long, whether they're permanently employed or whether they're, just temporary, that's gonna, I think, have, a huge kind of impact on where we're headed. But we've always had a large demand. We have always had a large demand.
Yeah, it's grown tremendously. I'm wondering, so I had a question from somebody, one of the attendees, who asked a question about bridge financing and about pros and cons, how that's working in this market right now. And, you're reading about that, where people are they're buying a home and then they have to sell the home that they currently live in order to make the deal happen. And they have to make a bridge to get there. So in some things I'm reading, it's not going so well. So I wonder, Ryan, do you have any thoughts on how bridging can be structured to make it work? And what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that, I find it to be an interesting question in that we don't, I think that we've just dealt with 2 closings as an example where there was bridging that was involved. And I didn't see that there was any issues. What I can say is that bridge financing, like other mortgages right now, is we're seeing a weirdly sort of higher interest rate from the banks, notwithstanding that the Bank of Canada's rates are like at 0.5 or something like this. Crazy low is my understanding. And, a bridge finance obviously is a very short period of time. For people who don't know what that is, it's if you're buying a house prior to you selling your house and you've got a closing day that's lined up for sure and it's on a deal that's firm, bridge financing gives you the ability to buy that house in advance and then sell your house and pay out. It's essentially a temporary mortgage for the span of time between when you buy your house and sell the subsequent house that you are selling to get the funds. So I suppose right now what you're going to see is very short periods of time. I don't imagine that banks at this point in time are going to allow for very long periods of time to bridge a closing. So in other words, you're probably going to see no more than at least a month. The last bridge finance that we did was 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't think a bank feels nervous. What's going to happen in 2 weeks, 3 weeks? We can't have another catastrophe. But what we can say is we have no idea what will happen in a month. We don't know what it'll look like. And I think a bank is probably quite nervous to say, yeah, we're going to bridge your house. It's going to be worth what it was a month ago, because I can tell you, I think even our house here, I don't think houses in Toronto in general are worth what they were worth a month and a half ago. Maybe that's a temporary dip, but to bridge on a house like that, I can see that being something banks would probably want to stay away from, but I do think, for other options there, there are sort of other avenues to do it. And I always encourage people to sort of reach out to a broker in this specific time, because I think you're going to have solutions from credit unions to bridge. You're also going to have private lenders that are going to be a little bit more, have a higher risk tolerance and prepared to bridge on something like that. And, you might get a 10%, 12%, 13% interest on a bridge, and a bit of a fee. But the reality is, if you need to close and you're prepared to sell and buy in this market, that's sort of what you're going to be dealing with. The point is, you still have options, and I think that yes, chartered banks are going to be very reluctant to do long bridges, but I can say that we've seen them. We've been seeing them.
Yeah. So you brought up something I wanted to throw back to you. Right? You brought up the idea of people. Oh, geez, I just forgot what I was saying. Geez, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
It was what was it now? It was. I forgot. We'll come back.
Okay, no worries.
Guys, ask us questions. We are gonna wrap it up shortly.
We're wrapping up soon.
But feel free to ask us something that you guys want to know. We're more than happy to put our input.
I think, I think that what I find interesting is how, just to go back to finance just a little bit, I think it's interesting what banks are doing, which is they're sort of trying to insulate themselves by charging out more interest to clients, when in fact that actually it may not work as they're hoping. The reality is, if someone isn't employed or they're not going to get a subsidy from the government, you're going to see that they're not going to be able to pay that mortgage. And you can jack an interest rate if you want, but it's not going to give that individual an ability to pay. So I think at this point, my opinion is banks need to sort of relax the idea. Bank of Canada is anticipating that unemployment rate going up and continuing to go up. I mean, we're not in the double digits yet, but I imagine that's going to happen soon.
It will be. Yeah,
and,
it will be.
And you can only see that your interest rate is going to play very little role in whether you can pay your mortgage. So banks should be more reluctant, I think, to increase interest rates at this point. This is not about. I don't think it's just right at this moment a time to focus on making money. I think you're going to lose long term. My opinion. It's just an opinion, but I think banks will lose long term if they keep that up. I think what we will see from banks, sort of naturally, is they're going to adjust interest rates because they're going to realize that's only going to help them perpetuate the clients they're going to need when this recovers, right? And to keep those mortgages alive,
Yeah, I mean, banks, to my mind, banks will act like banks do. They're very risk averse, and they're always trying to minimize risk. And so, even though the interest rates are low and they will go lower, we're probably going to be in a very low interest rate economy for the next 3 or 4 years easily, which after the dip is in economically is really going to help the economy boom around 2021, 2022. Who knows, but that's the idea. Mm-hmm. But the banks right now are trying to build in risk premiums because, typically mortgage rates and interest rates almost run in lockstep, but the Bank of Canada rates are going to go down, and mortgage rates now are going up because they're anticipating more default and more risk. And I think once the banks normalize again, that's going to be a signal to everybody that this has calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Just a comment from Nicole. Will you guys have a 2.0 round following April? I think we're going to have...
It's a good idea.
It's a good idea. I mean, I think what we'll do is we're and I don't know if this was just in Andreas's head or my head, but I think that we're going to have some ongoing discussions and try to see if we can have some maybe every couple of weeks have a discussion about it, because I do think things are going to be changing quite rapidly, and I don't think that I don't see that this wouldn't be worthwhile to do in another 2 weeks. So we're going to try and do it again.
It'll change again. So is that one of your people, Lou, on Instagram?
Yeah. So is this still a market to invest in? Are there opportunities for investors, current homeowners, and first-time home buyers? So I do know investors that are investing in the market right now, and of course they're looking for deals, right? You're gonna capitalize really on the people that need to sell, and so it's just finding that right property and then negotiating down from there. And unfortunately there are people out there right now that absolutely do need to sell. They're either caught with already bought something, and the market has shifted a little bit, so they're going to be a lot more flexible with the price. If they've lost their job, then it's same thing. They're in financial distress, and so they are they do want to sell. So I think there's going to be opportunity there. But besides that, I think if we kind of sit tight for a little bit, then that there may be some opportunities there as well. I'm just noticing that the IG Live is gonna end pretty soon.
Okay.
So we're probably gonna say bye to you guys here. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. Aura LLP, you can ask them, anything, legal questions, whatever. They're amazing. You've got Andreas and Ryan there. Andreas, if you have anything to add to.
Are we letting go of IG Live, or are we letting go of everything?
I think let's let go of IG Live first, because it's going to end in a few seconds.
Okay. All right. Bye, IG Live.
Yeah. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me. Okay.
Yeah, reach out anytime.
Thanks, guys, for hopping on. Bye.
So for everybody in the Zoom, I think that was a very good question. Is this a good market to invest in? I think I'd agree with a lot of what Lou said. I think also that we haven't really seen the dip yet. The information just hasn't worked through the market. So there are opportunities there. Again, from what I've seen from assignments in downtown Toronto condos, they have been dips about 10-15% of per square foot pricing from where it was. So I think there are some distress and people and a lot of investors who've made their money who do want to exit. But I don't think, and again, what do I know really? This is my opinion, but I do not see any kind of a percentage dip of 20-30% or a hot deal. I don't see that. Again, there might be specific projects, developer projects, where there are incentives. So I think it's a time to if you've got some higher risk tolerance to maybe get in the market. There are opportunities, but they're going to be very, very specific. It's still not a buyer's market necessarily. I think it's more of a frozen market.
I agree with that. Actually, with the stats, it's a 68% seller's market right now, so it's not a buyer's market.
Oh wow!
Interesting.
Okay, there's a
That's
stat.
a good stat. That's a good stat. I see we have a question here from Victor Ha. I'm wondering.
Yeah. Hey, Victor.
Hey, Victor. Sorry. Thanks for your comments there on the bank rates. Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I'm glad you agree because I think that's true. Cash liquidity problem there for sure. Re-rents. Do you see the rent payments to be the same rate into May 1st? Rent in May 1st, 2020. Well, I mean, payments for rents are really dependent on employment. It really depends on employment and also subsidies from the government at this point, because we don't know how much people can even really work at this point. But the fact of the matter is, rents will stay where rent payments, I don't think, will happen until there's a stabilization of some kind, whether that's we have a clear idea of the subsidies that will be coming over the course of the next few months, or there's an uptick of, I don't know, my understanding is actually there is an uptick in hiring in like IT right now. And so if you had a lot of people shifting over and you would see some employment coming out of those sectors for people who don't traditionally work in those sectors, then maybe. But just to your point, Victor, I would say no, I don't think so. I think we're gonna see. I think rent payments are going to continue to be a problem until we have a stabilization of an idea about employment and government subsidies. That's just sort of what I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think 75% is a pretty good capture rate in this economy. I think it'll continue to be there because the fact of the matter is that everybody is kind of under the gun all at the same time. This is kind of the demand supply problem has not changed. The market fundamentals have not changed, and I think everybody is very understanding of, okay, you've lost your job. It's not like you're a problem tenant and you just don't want to pay. And so I think the good faith element will last to some degree, because again, as the landlords, especially in residential, and the commercial is a little different, they need the money as well. So I think they're more open to payment plans, to creative ways to help someone make that gap out. And then I think also the government will recognize that, especially for commercial landlords, because there is no program right now at all for small businesses with commercial rent. So that is facing us. We're facing that with our downtown office. That's becoming an issue. So Victor wrote, that's a great question. More delinquencies. It's possible. I think you might see a little bit more, but I personally don't foresee a big rise in delinquencies.
Yeah, I think rents will continue as they are because, like you say as well, which you make a good point there, Andreas, about payment plans, right? If that's negotiated, then it's negotiated probably for 4 or 5 months. So we will see like a stabilization as a result of that for sure. Yeah.
All right. So we've been on this for about an hour. So we said we would wrap it up after an hour. So maybe we could probably talk for a while, but everyone's tired and I'm sure wants to go to sleep. Yeah. So, I hope everyone found this interesting. I mean, we had a lot of fun doing this. It was always meant as a casual conversation about a roundtable and just discussing thoughts on where we see the market going. So we want to thank all the attendees for coming. Thanks for everybody on IG Live. Thanks for all the questions. And I think we'll do more of these, so please stay tuned for that. In closing, Lou, do you have any final thoughts? I'm going to ask everyone one question. What is your number one opportunity thought and also big problem thought in this whole situation?
I think my number one opportunity is for millennials. If they can get into the market, now is your time to really get into the market, because regardless of where kind of prices go, like at the end of the day, no one has a magic ball or no one has a crystal ball, right? Like when the market is hot, it's still uncertain. No matter where the market is, it's still uncertain. We can't predict it. But the good thing about now is you have like no competition, right? And that's been a huge problem for millennials, is that they're constantly competing and they can't get anything a lot of times because, they're either outbid by an investor or in multiple offers, right? So I think for millennials, people trying to get into the market, I think this is good. Sorry, and the other question was...
What's your problem thought or your thing you're worried about?
My problem thought would be the unemployment. I really want to see where we kind of end up with that.
Okay. What about you, Ryan?
Well, for me, I think specific to real estate, I would say, one of the biggest challenges right now, based on what I'm seeing, is your ability to get financing for something coming. So, I mean, we've had 2 or 3 circumstances where I'm seeing circumstances just within our practice where we're seeing problems where people had planned to get, had pretty clear equity in their home and they were looking to refinance for the purposes of investing. And banks, because of the uncertainty. So really, it's really the uncertainty, but I would say that the uncertainty is creating a real problem for you to be able to secure a mortgage at this point in time. Having said that, I would say the opportunity is that in 2 months, you might be able to buy something that you could have bought for $700,000. You can probably buy for $5 million, right? I mean, we're depending on the market, of course, not Toronto, but I could see something like that happening depending on how low we get here. But I would say that there's going to be some opportunity in the next couple of months on the buy side, and I'm pretty excited about that myself, to be honest. Yeah.
I think I should probably answer my own question. In terms of the opportunity, I'm gonna go philosophical with this one, and I'm gonna say that this is an opportunity, I think, for everybody to take a pause and to take stock of how you're doing and reconnect with your closely with the people that are important to you, your friends and family, and rejig your life if that's what you want to do, and this is the time to be introspective and plan, and planning again goes to buying and selling real estate if that's what you're interested in doing as well. I think the one of the things in real estate that I'm concerned about is the extent of this issue and how it's going to play out in kind of secondary markets of Toronto, say for example, Whippies of the world, Ajaxes, Oshawas, where you've had very high pricing because people cannot get into, say, closer urban centers, and the incomes out there are lower typically than they are in, say, the Toronto area, and then the debts are highly leveraged. And so I think I'm worried about those kinds of say bedroom communities, so to speak. I think the GTA will be in Toronto will be largely fine, but I think I hope that again the Curtises and Pickerings and all those places, I think that could be a problem. So those are my thoughts, and again I want to thank everybody for joining us. We will stay tuned, please, for another one of these. I think we'll keep doing these as we go. So Lou, where can everybody who wants to find you find you?
You can find me on social media. You can find me on
just do a search. Just Google it. Just Google it.
Yeah, you can just type in Luzhou, Luzhou, type in Facebook or Instagram, and you should be able to find me. It's Luzhou Realtor, and then from there you have access to all my other platforms.
Lou's a celebrity, so it's not hard to find her.
No.
She's Instagram famous.
Not even. Not even close. Not even.
So you can find Aura LLP at Aura_LLP on IG. You can find us on Facebook, Aura Law Group Toronto. You can find my IG at Andreas Kalo 416, and AuraLLP.com is our website. So be in touch anytime if you want to have a chat or if we can help you in any way.
Yeah. You can also find me on IG, personal IG, Ryan the Property Lawyer. Everybody's there. I mean, look, it's easy to find us these days, right? It's easy to find.
This guy's a real property lawyer.
I'm not.
All right, everybody. So again, thank you very much for coming, and we're going to end it there. So have a great night. Be safe. Stay home, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.